Oh, let them rock! And there you go. Today, ACDC. To be perfectly honest, maybe not quite my favorite band, but still you kind of have to respect those crazy Aussies for all the stuff they've done throughout the years. The sheer energy of Angus Young as he's duck walking and running across the stage, and technically speaking, probably not the most versatile band in the world, but they have always stuck to their guns and their cheeky humor throughout the years, so you gotta give them that. Now, when I'm approaching bands, I usually go for the versions of the albums. Like, if we have a UK band, I usually try to go for the English version rather than the American version. If the band is American, then I think the American versions are usually the thing to go to. So the native land is really important. So for the longest time, I had a huge problem with ACDC because, as you might know, some of those Australian versions are kind of tough to get a hold of, and finally I managed to get those, especially these 70s albums. Many of those, they're kind of different if you compare the Australian version to the international one. So back in 1975, early on that year, ACDC released High Voltage, and this is different. This is not the same album as the international version is called also High Voltage. So it's a very, very different track list. Actually, this international High Voltage is very close to the second album of ACDC called TNT. So there you have it. But anyway, here's the Australian High Voltage. And here's the track list. You got lots of lovely songs here, like Baby Please Don't Go, She's Got Balls, Little Lover, Stick Around, Soul Stripper, You Ain't Got a Hold on Me, Love Song, and Show Business. And some of these songs are kind of somewhat difficult to find, or used to be back in the day, difficult to get a hold of. In the 80s, I think around 85, 83, 85, around that era, ACDC released this 74 Jailbreak album. And with the exception of the opening track Jailbreak, the rest of these songs are actually from this CD, but it's only half of the album. So if you want to get a hold of the whole album, you need to get Jailbreak, and there are 2 tracks on this international version of High Voltage. And then there are 2 other tracks on this collection called Backtracks. So there's the final 2 missing songs there, and it's all kind of complicated, and they're in the wrong order, obviously, and all that. So it's kind of a hassle. Listening to this, I like this album. I don't think it's a bad album. It isn't the best ACDC album, though. As a good rock and roll album, it's a very fun listening experience, but as an ACDC fan, they really took a huge step forward with their follow-up album called TNT, or High Voltage, ironically, the international version of High Voltage. So, what I think of this album, yeah, it's not bad. I would definitely get it if you're into rock music. There's one cover song, Baby Please Don't Go. The rest is their own material. She's Got Balls is it's a fun song. Soul Stripper is a longer epic. You Ain't Got a Hold on Me, I think, is a good song. Show Business is great. So it's a fun album. Not everything here is perfect, but it's the beginning of the band. And when they remastered this in the early 2000s, I think they should have released this as it is. I think it's very interesting and works on its own. Then, here's the second album. It's called TNT. And the international version basically is called High Voltage and has a different cover artwork. It has pretty much the same songs. So the only differences here are that in the original TNT, you get a track called Rocker and School Days, which is a cover tune also from Chuck Berry. They have replaced those songs. They have She's Got Balls and Little Lover placed here in the place of Rocker and School Days. It's honestly pretty much the same album with just a different cover artwork. I really like this one. Maybe the mixes sound a bit rougher on these Australian ones, which gives it a kick. It's not too clean. It's kind of a nasty and dirty sounding album, ever so slightly dirtier sounding. Maybe I'm just imagining it, but it sounds more balls to the wall, this Australian version. So that's one reason why I think it might be a bit better than the High Voltage one. Also, the cover artwork I think is nice. With the first album, we have this silly drawn cover, so yeah. I mean, it's Australian humor with this dog pissing on this High Voltage, I don't know what you call it, moon. I think it's in Finland, a fuse box or whatever it's called. But here, yeah, I think it looks kind of nasty and dangerous and explosive, and that's where they were getting for. I think this is a very cool one and slightly better than the international High Voltage, but that's not a bad album in itself either. Those are the albums from 1975. Now in 1976, ACDC released this. It's called Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And I think it's not quite as good as TNT or the follow-up album, which was released in 1977. They did release this internationally with a very, I don't know, very silly cover. You can see these black things in front of the eyes. It's a nice reference to this album because inside the cover, there are all these band pictures where they're boozing around and having a party, and they have also those black things in front of their eyes, like no one would know who those guys are. You can clearly recognize them from the pictures. But it's a fun little joke. Only the names have been changed to protect the guilty, as is mentioned somewhere here in this album anyway. So it's a nice reference to that. And I think it's a fun cover artwork. These drawings, they're kind of silly, but I like them. This was way too nasty for the international release back in the 70s, so they couldn't get it out. And that's why they put the song Problem Child onto the international version of Let There Be Rock and kind of screwed the track listing on that one as well. Because by their fourth album, they could have just released the same album anyway. There was no reason to have two different versions of it, but that's what happened. But with this Dirty Deeds one, it took them to the 80s, I think 1981, before they released this one. And they really made a mess of the track list. When I listen to Dirty Deeds, I'm thinking, well, it could be a bit better. It's not a bad album. I think it's better than the first one was, High Voltage. But it's kind of a mess. However, there are three really strong tracks here. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap as the opening track. You also find it here. Problem Child. You also find it here. And Jailbreak, which is the closing track. And they managed to screw that one up somehow. I mean, if you're going to release Dirty Deeds, at least make sure you got those three great songs in there. I mean, if you want to fool around with the rest of the stuff, yeah, do as you please. But cutting out Jailbreak makes no sense. It was a single. And I think actually here on Backtrack's box set, we got even the single B-side, Fling Thing, released, which is kind of a rarity as well, I guess, at least before this box set was released. So at least have those three songs, Dirty Deeds, Problem Child, and Jailbreak. Those are the highlights of this album. But that being said, I don't think the B-side is too bad. I kind of like the tracks Squealer, Big Balls, Rockin' Peace, Ride On. It kind of works. The biggest problem with this album for me is I'm not a huge fan of Ain't No Fun, Waiting Around to Be a Millionaire. It kind of drags on a bit, but okay, I'm okay with it. It's fine. But there's gonna be some rocking. It's too slow and it doesn't have the energy. You know, the title says something that the song doesn't deliver. So I have a problem with that one. Other than that, yeah, I think it's a cool early ACDC album. And I see no reason why they would need to make such a mess of this international edition. I think this is the album, this and High Voltage, the first one. They are the two albums that suffer the most from this mess. I mean, it's all over the place. I can understand they figured out that it's kind of a weak A-side, so they kind of changed the track list to have the A-side songs on the B-side and some of the B-side songs on the A-side, but it's a mess. This international edition doesn't work for me at all, which is really unfortunate. There are some really killer songs here. So definitely this is a cool one to get. And then there's the fourth one, and it's called Let There Be Rock. And this is the Australian version. As far as the album covers go, I think I slightly prefer the Australian covers. But with this one, I think the international Let There Be Rock from 1977 is much cooler looking. And it makes sense with this cover artwork. Those are not even Angus Young's fingers on the front cover. So what's the point, you know? I kind of like the idea here that he's playing really fast, this thing, but it just, it kind of looks uninteresting, this cover artwork, so I don't like that too much. Track list on these two bad boys from 1977 is pretty much the same. The only difference is this version, the B-side starts with Overdose, and then you get this song Rhapsody in Blue. Whereas here, the B-side starts with Problem Child, and then you get Overdose. So there's one different song. Rhapsody in Blue has been replaced by Problem Child. And the reason is simply that Dirty Deeds was not released internationally until in the early 1980s. 1981, I think. So they really like playing Problem Child live, so they figured out, let's put that there. And the worst song on this Australian version, without a doubt, is Rhapsody in Blue. So I can kind of understand that, why they would cut it. But it's a really fun song. Yeah, it's once again this kind of inappropriate humor, talking about crabs and stuff like that. But it's a fun song and fun lyric, and you know, it's this early ACDC attitude of doing things. I really like the song, actually. I really enjoy listening to this one. That being said, the international version is obviously great as well. You can't really mess up when you have 7 out of these 8 songs on one album. For some reason, maybe the opening track Go Down isn't actually a huge favorite of mine. It seems that the 3rd and 4th tracks are the best. Both sides seem to get better as they progress, with Let There Be Rock and Bad Boy Boogie on the A side, and Helen, A Bad Place to Be, and Whole Lotta Rosie on the B side. So it's just one of those albums that really starts growing. It doesn't start off quite as strong, but it gets better as you listen to it. Definitely one of those albums that you need to listen to as whole. There was also a B-side track. I'm wondering what it was called. Carry Me Home, yeah. And that was released on the B-side of Dog Eat Dog single. So if you have this backtracks, you're gonna find that there. Also, they have released Stick Around and Love Song on backtracks. Those are from the first album. Then there was Fling Thing, which I mentioned, this Jailbreak B-side. Rockin' Peace from Dirty Deeds. And Carry Me Home, B-side of Dog Eat Dog. And then Rhapsody in Blue is also, you can find it here in this box set. And that's pretty much all the differences between the two versions of ACDC albums. I mean, here's the 5th one, Power Age. I think it's definitely a great album. Actually might be my favorite studio album from ACDC. It doesn't really have any of those huge hit songs, but it flows really well. I especially like the middle section of this album with songs like Riff Raff. I think that's my favorite. Sin City, What's Next to the Moon is really cool stuff. And Kicked in the Teeth, I think, is a fine closing track. Rock and Roll Damnation is a bit silly. I think this, maybe with Let There Be Rock, they kind of started this trend where the opening track is kind of like this easy single hit kind of thing. So I'm not a huge fan of Go Down. I'm not a huge fan of Rock and Roll Damnation. I'm not even a huge fan of Highway to Hell, to be honest. It's not a bad song, but it's kind of a hit single. And then the real album seems to begin around track number 3. They really get into this ACDC gear. They just want to kind of like open up the album in an easy and catchy sort of way. And then they really hit the ACDC-ness and that nasty boogie, that nasty rock and roll thing they're doing with the track number 3 around there. And actually, on this one, yeah, I forgot to mention, some of the European versions have an extra track called Cold Hearted Man. And if you're missing that one, you can find it here on Backtracks on this collection. And then, actually, what happened was they released a live album, If You Want Blood, You Got It. And it's from Powerade's tour, so the track listing is amazing, really. I think this is my favorite AC/DC live album. Even though this one has the jack, and I'm not a huge fan of that song. I don't know, I might actually prefer the studio version a bit better, because there's really singing about a card game there, and it's kind of sly and there's suggestive, but it's not quite as, blatant as the live version is. Also the ending, the studio version ending, where the crowd is going boo, boo, go home, and then you have Bon Scott saying, "Oh, thank you, glad you like the show, thank you." I think that's just great. I mean, it shows really well their Australian humor and the thing they're doing, which is sometimes I think lost in modern world. We don't always have that same sense of humor we used to back in the day. But yeah, definitely a cool live album. Check this one out. And then Bon Scott pretty soon died after that, so they only released one more studio album called Highway to Hell. And like I said, the opening doesn't quite convince me. Highway to Hell and Girls Got Rhythm, they're those easy single hits. Where this really begins, this album, is Walk All Over You. It kind of gets into this brand new gear, and then you got Beating Around the Bush. I think Touch Too Much, yeah, Shut Down in Flames. It just really gets going, this album. It sounds better, track by track. And really the middle section seems to be where AC/DC is really going for it. However, I have one beef with this international version. The track list is the same as on the Australian one. But how the heck did they lose these wonderful flames? I mean, this Australian cover is just so much cooler. Look at it. I mean, flames. They're basically, the guys are in hell here. Whereas this international version, it's just, bunch of brown and gray, sort of uninteresting. So I definitely prefer the Australian version based on the cover artwork. I think that's way more interesting, way cooler. Also, talking about these rarities, there's this Backtracks collection, which has, I think, one DVD, which is the Family Jewels Part 3. We'll get into that a bit again in a while. So we have on CD1 these studio rarities, which are definitely cool. 7 kind of rare tracks from Bon Scott era. I think that's very nice. And then there are some bonus tracks with Brian Johnson. I think there's a deluxe version where there's even more stuff. But really, I have no need for it, as I have the Australian versions already. So it's a bunch of the same stuff, more or less. However, talking about CD2, there are some live rarities. And I think there are only like 4 songs with Bon Scott here. And the rest 11 are with Brian Johnson. And they're all good live tracks. No problem about them. Shut Down in Flames, I think you can find elsewhere as well. And Livewire and Dog Eat Dog. But Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. I think this might be the only place where I've officially heard Bon Scott singing Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And that's the opening track of CD2. So if you're a fan of ACDC and Bon Scott, I think this is a very good buy. I would recommend this. There's plenty of interesting rarities with Bon doing that stuff. Here's the box set Bonfire. They have 2 live albums here. Live from the Atlantic Studios. I think that's from the... This is from the Let There Be Rock tour, I think. And there's Livewire, Problem Child, High Voltage, Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be, Dog Eat Dog, The Jack, Whole Lotta Rosie, and Rocker. It's a very cool little live album. Not quite as good as If You Want Blood, but still, yeah, it's a cool one, and you get to hear certain songs live here, like Dog Eat Dog. I don't think I've heard that one played live with Bon Scott anywhere else, officially at least. Then there's another live album, and this time it's from the Highway to Hell tour. So now if you have all of these different box sets and stuff, you get live stuff from Let There Be Rock tour, their 4th album. You get live stuff from Power Age, their 5th album, and then from their 6th album, Highway to Hell. And this live album is curiously called Let There Be Rock the Movie, possibly because there's also this DVD version from that same time. And they have some really cool songs here. Shut Down in Flames and Walk All Over You. That's a very cool one played live. And Highway to Hell and Ghost Got Rhythm. And the rest is pretty much the usual AC/DC track list of that era. Or even latter era. They usually play pretty much the same songs, more or less. On disc 4, there are some rarities. They're basically like demo versions of more familiar songs. Dirty Eyes is the demo version to Whole Lotta Rosie. Touch Too Much, it's a completely different song to the one released on Highway to Hell. If You Want Blood, You've Got It. Might be, I don't remember how much that is different from Highway to Hell. Backseat Confidential became Beating Around the Bush, so that's a demo version of that. Get It Hot, but it's different. It's not the same song as Highway to Hell. And then there are some live songs here. Sin City, She's Got Balls live, that's a cool one. School Days, that's a nice one. It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll. Well, that's just, you know, that's just taken from the studio album, so I don't really understand why it was placed here. There's no need. It seems like they're just padding this up. And Ride On from Dirty Deeds. Those are cool songs, but I don't know why you need them here. They used to play It's a Long Way to the Top live. I think I've seen it live somewhere, and I think Bon actually played that. Those Scottish pipes, what do you call them? Bagpipes, yeah. So, Bonfire, I think for the most part it's really cool. Just the 2 live albums alone are great value. One huge problem I have with this one is adding Back in Black here at the end. It's the first album where Bon Scott is not singing. So, if they had placed Highway to Hell here or Let There Be Rock, I would kind of understand why, but Back in Black just seems to be like, it's our best-selling album, let's put it here as well. It's already, I don't know, like 10 times platinum or whatever, so let's just make it even bigger. I think that sucks. The Bonfire box is supposed to be about Bon Scott. It's in the title of the box, so, you know, having that Black album there, and I mean, how many people who are buying this Bonfire collection don't have Black Album anyway. I mean, that's kind of silly in its own way, but yeah, I just don't get it. Please put Let There Be Rock here or Highway to Hell here, but have him Back in Black, it's just, it cheapens the whole thing. It's kind of, I don't quite understand. I have the same problem with backtracks as well. I mean, yeah, there's plenty of stuff from Bon Scott, but there's even more stuff from Brian Johnson. And surely you could release this separately. I mean, the whole Family Jewels Part 3, for instance, it's all Brian Johnson. And back in the day when they released this, it was quite nice. You have DVD 1, you get Bon Scott stuff. So it cuts off around Highway to Hell because he died soon after that. And then starting from Back in Black stuff, you get DVD 2. And fine, you know, if that's all the Bon Scott stuff that you have, I would still be very happy with that. And then the Brian Johnson stuff, obviously there was more, so they decided to continue that with backtracks. But for some, I don't know what god-awful reason, they decided to put the rest of the Bon Scott stuff here, plug me in, and it's really good. It's lovely to have these things. But why not have a separate box set for the Bon Scott stuff and a separate box set for Brian Johnson stuff? I mean, both of those would obviously sell. There are some really huge fan of 70s ACDC, I'm sure of it, that would anyway just want to have the Bon Scott stuff. And then there are some fans who really just like the more professional and maybe less exciting, less amateurish, but also less vibrating and interesting modern stuff, starting with Back in Black and onwards. So just having those like separately, I think would make more sense. This is really a mess. But that being said, I'm grateful that all this has been released. I don't know if you can even see the track list, but it's called Plug Me In. You have 3 DVDs here. So you have lots of these really kind of rarity songs, like especially the early or the mid-70s stuff. Early on in their career was really cool, I think. There's, you know, Baby Please Don't Go, Played Live with all the wigs and giant hammers and all that. There's Jailbreak with the explosions and the guards and the criminals in their own outfits and all that stuff. And TNT, you get all this stuff, and it's a lot of great stuff. And then I think on Plug Me In, they have like the second best versions of these things. But there's the picture quality isn't always quite as good. But there's some really interesting stuff here, like when they play live, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. So that's here in Plug Me In. Also, one huge mess they have here is this collector's edition. It has the 3rd DVD in here. And the 3rd DVD is called Between the Cracks. So actually they didn't include every song here in order, but they have this separate disc which has some Bon Scott stuff and some Brian Johnson stuff that wasn't released in the original, like the basic version of this box set. So it's really, I just wish they would have placed those in order. At least for this collector's edition. Maybe have like these broader versions of these DVDs, or change the cut somewhere else, you know, to maybe have the first disc up to, I don't know, the Power Age era, and then have the Highway to Hell stuff on the beginning of DVD 2. If it's too much, if they cannot fit that much stuff into one DVD. I don't know, it's really a mess trying to watch these in order. They even have tracks from the same show, I think, Santa Albums High School, March 1976. So they have School Days and TNT here on DVD 1, But then they have She's Got Balls, and it's a long way to the top here on DVD 3. So it's kind of like, why make this so complicated? Why not just have the whole show, all the tracks that they have recorded on one disc, so I can look at them back to back? I mean, what's wrong with that? I guess there would be, maybe some tracks would be repeating in that case, but who cares? You know, if it's a different version. There's so little stuff from the mid-70s anyhow. I don't think that would be a problem, really. I think it would be nice to see that in one place. But still, I'm glad they released this at all, because it's been such a long while, and there are these bands who kind of almost like seem to refuse to release their old stuff and just release the big selling ones. So yeah, having all this here kind of, I don't know, I guess it kind of makes sense. I should be grateful that they have released that. Here's a Let There Be Rock film. I think there are some interviews here and stuff like that. They play more or less like a whole live show here as well. If you want to see, if you just want to have one live thing from ACDC, this one has a picture, and the track list is pretty cool as well. I still prefer If You Want Blood, because I think Power Age has been so ignored. They do have Sin City here though, but I'm just missing Riff Raff way too much. I think that was such a lovely tune to have included there. And If You Want Blood, you got it. Other ACDC stuff. Well, I'm not such a huge fan of the newer era ACDC, but here's Back in Black. And I think it's definitely a pretty cool album. Maybe it's better without this plastic cover ruining the effect. And here's For Those About to Rock. I think this is a pretty cool album as well. Some people complain about this one and say, oh, it's too slow, it's terrible compared to Back in Black. What? Really? I mean, I don't think Back in Black is particularly fast with songs like Hell's Bells and You Shook Me All Night Long. Actually, I kind of like tracks like Shake a Leg probably better. And the title track, Back in Black, is amazing. I agree on that one. But as a whole album, I think actually For Those About to Rock might be better. It just seems more fun. I mean, the band seems to be in good shape on this one. And something about, you know, Brian Johnson, I think he's maybe singing a bit higher on Back in Black, but I think he's still singing really, really well on this one. And maybe even sounds more at home. Maybe he's kind of knowing better what he's doing on this one. I kind of feel this is the last really good ACDC album, but that being said, none of it really compares with the Bon Scott stuff. It's just a different band. They suddenly kind of lose some of their sense of humor, and they come too professional and too, I don't know what. They've just been doing the same things over and over again live, so I guess it kind of like turns into work or a career at that point. I mean, after Back in Black, they never really were in any doubt that they would have enough audience and get their album sold. When that sold so well, they knew they would be doing this for pretty much for the rest of their lives, which some of the members have. And, you know, rest in peace, or rock in peace to those guys. Here's an ACDC live album from the early 90s. I think this is a really good one. Just get the 2-disc version. It's got one of those Money Talks bills included in here. A really, really good one. For the late 80s and early 90s, songs like Thunderstruck and Razor's Edge, I think is called, Fire Your Guns, Are You Ready? Who Made Who, all those songs you can find here, and it's really good stuff. So this one actually, it covers pretty much all the ACDC that I want after For Those About to Rock. And this Live at Donington, this was released around the same time as the live double disc CD. So that's pretty much all the ACDC I have. Get the Australian versions. I would definitely say get TNT. This is a really cool album. And if you cannot get this at a reasonable price, at least get the international version of High Voltage. And then Let There Be Rock. I might even go with the international version. The cover artwork is so cool, and the track list, I think, works even with Problem Child. It's a really cool song. Get those. I would also urge you to check out Power Age. Damn, this is such a good album. It's so underrated, I feel. It's a really fun listening. If you want to listen to a whole album through, I find it's probably ACDC doesn't have anything that beats that as a whole album. And then, of course, Highway to Hell. It's already a really well-known album and loved album. Just, listen to the other tracks as well, not just the opening track. Even though Highway to Hell it's a fun hit single, but there's a lot more to this album than just the opening track. And that's some ACDC for you guys. Now, what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Put some comments there if you want to. Check you on the next one.